Everyone's watched a Western. The hero in the white hat, the Indian villain, the damsel in distress, and that shootout that lasts 5 minutes. Pure fiction. The real Old West was way more wild, brutal, and unfair than Hollywood ever showed. Today, you're going to hear 20 true stories that sound like they came straight out of a script, but actually happened. Before we dive in, if you're into true stories like this, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next trip into the past. Number 1. Bass Reeves was born enslaved in the South, but he escaped during the Civil War and ended up in Indian Territory, where he learned the languages of several tribes. When he became a federal deputy, he patrolled an area bigger than many states put together. The guy arrested more than 3,000 outlaws, never took a penny in bribes, and hardly ever needed to draw first. He carried handcuffs on one side and a Bible on the other. Decades later, Hollywood came up with the Lone Ranger, a masked hero with a native partner, a white horse, and a strict code of honor. The coincidence was way too big, but nobody said the real hero was black. Even today, not many people know the name Bass Reeves. Number 2. In the late 1800s, the big steel and railroad tycoons had a problem. Strikes and organized workers were threatening their businesses. The solution? Call the Pinkerton Agency. These guys weren't just detectives. They worked like a private army for whoever could pay. They infiltrated unions, kept tabs on labor leaders, and when things got heated, they showed up armed to handle it. The most famous case happened in Homestead, Pennsylvania in 1892. 300 Pinkerton agents came in by boat down the river to face Carnegie's steel workers on strike. The gunfight lasted for hours and left people dead on both sides. The message was clear. If you had enough money, you could hire your own army. And that raised a question that still bothers a lot of people today. Number 3. During the California Gold Rush, Charlie Parkhurst was known as one of the toughest guys around. He drove stagecoaches on dangerous trails, faced down outlaws, lost an eye to a horse's kick, and had a reputation for not taking any crap. In 1868, Charlie walked into a voting booth and cast his vote for president, something no American woman could legally do at the time. When he died in 1879, the doctor who examined the body revealed something nobody expected. Charlie was biologically female, born Charlotte Parkhurst on the East Coast decades earlier. The news spread through the papers and left everyone shocked. How did someone live like that for so long without anyone noticing? Historians still debate whether it was about survival or simply the desire to live free in a world that didn't give women that option. Number 4. The biggest con of the Old West happened right after the Gold Rush, when America was still addicted to the idea of easy wealth. In 1872, 2 slick guys showed up in San Francisco saying they'd found a secret mountain in Colorado covered in diamonds and rubies. The story was too good to be true, but nobody wanted to hear that. They salted the site with fake stones and took powerful bankers and investors out to see it with their own eyes. Men in suits knelt in the dirt, picking up shiny little rocks like kids on Christmas. Big money poured in, including cash from a Rothschild relative. The scam only fell apart when a geologist named Clarence King visited the spot and realized the stones were scattered in a way that looked way too staged. By the time the fraud came out, the 2 con men had already vanished with a fortune that would be worth millions of dollars today. Number 5. In 1892, Wyoming's cattle barons decided they didn't want to share the territory with small ranchers anymore. They made a list with dozens of names accusing those people of theft, without a single piece of proof. Instead of going to court, they took a train to Texas and hired 50 gunmen to handle it the hard way. When the armed gang rode into Johnson County, the news spread like wildfire. Farmers, shopkeepers, and workers dropped everything, grabbed their guns, and surrounded the group at a ranch. It got so bad that Washington sent in the army, but not to protect the locals. The soldiers came to escort the rich men and their hired guns out safely. None of them were convicted. To this day, in that part of the West, a lot of people tell this story as proof that when money talks, the law listens. Number 6. Stagecoach Mary, a woman you didn't mess with. At the tail end of the Old West, when most women couldn't even vote, a formerly enslaved woman named Mary Fields became a legend in Montana. She was over 50, over 6 feet tall, smoked cigars, and said what she thought without apologizing. The government needed someone to deliver mail on a route packed with snow, wolves, and outlaws. Mary took the job with a .38 revolver on her hip and a rifle in the wagon. One time, when her horses froze to death in a blizzard, she threw the mail bag over her shoulder and walked for miles in the dark to the next town. At the local saloon, people said not even the sheriff was as intimidating as her. But for the folks waiting on news from home, Mary never failed. She didn't miss a single delivery. Out there, that mattered more than any medal. Number 7. In the late 1800s, William Buffalo Bill Cody created a show that traveled the world putting on the Old West. The detail most people don't know, he hired real native people to act out defeats against white cowboys every night. Among them was Sitting Bull, the same Sioux leader who had actually fought the U.S. Army. Why did he agree? For the money and for the chance to come face to face with the same people who called him an enemy. Behind the scenes, he commented on how the audience looked surprised to see a savage acting calm and polite. Meanwhile, the crowd left, thinking they'd seen the real frontier, not realizing it was all theater. Sitting Bull even performed for Queen Victoria in England. Years later, he was killed by police on his reservation. Number 8. Belle Starr had a reputation for being untouchable. For years, she ran a horse-thieving network right under the authorities' noses, and nobody could keep her locked up for long. Her secret was simple. She knew every trail, every hiding spot, and every man willing to do the dirty work. She married a Cherokee warrior and turned their property into a stopover for fugitives wanted in multiple states. In 1889, 2 days before turning 41, someone shot her in the back on a dirt road near her home. The killer was never found. Too many people wanted her dead, and it became the biggest mystery in Indian Territory. The suspect list included everyone from her own son to neighbors she fought with over land. Number 9. In 1874, a group of 6 men set out to cross the Rocky Mountains in Colorado in the middle of winter. Alfred Packer was the guide. Weeks later, only he showed up alive in a nearby town. The problem was, he looked way too well for someone who supposedly starved in the snow. And he was carrying money and belongings from the other 5. When authorities found the bodies, it was a nightmare scene. Cut marks and signs that flesh had been removed. At the trial, the judge supposedly said Packer ate 5 Democrats from the county. The line became instant folklore. Over time, the case picked up a dark humor vibe that only Americans can give to a tragedy. Today, a university in Colorado has a cafeteria named after him. Yep, a cannibal honored in a place where people eat. Number 10. The Chinese built America and got kicked out. In the late 1800s, thousands of Chinese workers took on the most dangerous jobs on the transcontinental railroad. They hung dynamite off cliffs, dug tunnels in the middle of snowstorms, and faced deadly avalanches. They were paid a lot less than white workers, and many died without even having their names written down anywhere. When the tracks finally linked coast to coast and the money started flowing, the gratitude didn't come. In 1882, Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, slamming the door on new Chinese immigrants and making life hell for the ones already here. Citizenship? Not a chance. These men helped build the country from east to west, and their reward was being treated like they'd never set foot on American soil. Number 11. The Reno Brothers, the world's first train robbers. In 1866, out in rural Indiana, these guys realized something nobody had thought of yet. A train was basically a rolling safe on tracks. The plan worked. They boarded at night, took control of the crew, and uncoupled the front cars. They forced the engineer to keep going, far away from any help. They busted into the mail car and grabbed $13,000, a fortune back then. But the impact went beyond the money. They showed the whole country you could hit a train the way you'd rob a bank on the move. Jesse James and Butch Cassidy would copy that playbook later. For Civil War vets who came back broke and lost, the rails looked like an easy shot. Little law, slow communication, and federal money rolling through every night. Number 12. At the end of the 19th century, Fort Smith, Arkansas, got a reputation nobody wanted. Judge Isaac C. Parker ran that federal court for more than 20 years, and the nickname came fast, the hanging judge. He tried crimes committed in a territory where the law barely existed, outlaws, horse thieves, murderers running from civilization. During his career, 88 men ended up swinging from the wooden gallows next to the fort. On execution days, lines of condemned men crossed the dirt yard while crowds watched in silence. Guards said you could feel a heavy smell in the air even before the bell rang: sweat, cheap whiskey, and pure fear. For a lot of people back then, Fort Smith became shorthand for a simple truth. On the frontier, a rope was the quickest answer to chaos. Number 13. When you think of Butch Cassidy's Wild Bunch, you probably picture only bearded guys robbing trains. But there was a woman in the middle of it, and almost nobody tells that story. Laura Bullion grew up in Texas, the daughter of people who lived on the move, and she learned early that life wasn't going to be easy. She carried a gun, helped with the robberies, and passed counterfeit money to keep the gang going. When things got tight, she'd cut her hair short and disappear with fake papers. In 1901, the law finally caught her. She did time in New York and got out in 1905, determined to become someone else. She worked in hotels, lived quietly, and never talked about her past again. She died in 1961 in an America of new cars and television, keeping secrets from a time that already felt like a legend. Number 14. In 1884, in a New Mexico that still ran on gunfire, a 19-year-old kid named Alfago Baca decided it was time for someone to bring some order to the mess. Texas cowboys had been doing whatever they wanted in villages of Mexican people, and Alfago wasn't having it. When he arrested one of those guys, things got ugly. About 80 armed men surrounded the little house where he was holed up. What came next wasn't just any shootout. It lasted a day and a half. More than 4,000 shots tore through the walls and doors. When it was over, Alfago walked out, basically without a scratch, while 4 men were dead. Later, he ditched the badge, became a lawyer, and got into politics. But the reputation of taking on a small army by himself never left him. Number 15. In 1899, when the Old West was already dying out and outlaws were turning into legends, a 28-year-old Canadian woman decided to make history in the most unlikely way. Pearl Hart cut her hair, dressed like a man, and set up an ambush on a dusty road near Globe, Arizona. She stopped a stagecoach, robbed the passengers, and took off with $430 in her pocket. The whole country lost its mind over the news. It wasn't every day a woman did what only male outlaws were supposed to do. Newspapers went crazy, magazines splashed her face everywhere, and Pearl became an instant celebrity. She was arrested, put on trial, and got 5 years. But here's the good part. She only spent a year and a half behind bars. The official excuse? Jail wasn't an appropriate place for a lady. Ironic, considering what she'd just done. Number 16. In 1890, a newspaper in Tombstone, Arizona, published something nobody expected. Hunters supposedly shot down a giant creature in the desert, something like a pterodactyl. The story said the thing was propped up against a wooden wall, with the men posing next to it. The problem is that photo just vanished. Nobody knows where it went. Collectors have dug through archives, microfilm, and old auctions trying to find any proof. To this day, nothing has turned up. What's weird is that a lot of people swear up and down they've seen that image at some point in their lives. But when you ask them to show it, nobody can. That raises an uncomfortable question. Are we looking at a collective memory that went wrong? A newspaper prank from back then? Or did something truly strange cross the Arizona sky that year? Number 17. In Boot Hill Cemetery in Tombstone, Arizona, there's a headstone that became a legend. Lester Moore worked for Wells Fargo when he got into an argument over a package. In the Old West, fights like that ended in gunfire, and he took 4 .44 caliber bullets before he could even draw his own gun. He died right there. No doctor, no trial. Back then, justice came out of the barrel of a pistol. What made the story famous was the epitaph carved on his headstone, a short rhyme that mixes humor and tragedy in a way only the Wild West could. Even today, visitors stop at the grave, crack a half smile, and tip their hat. That line became a symbol of how life out there could end in the blink of an eye. Number 18. Rattlesnake. Dick wasn't just any outlaw. Richard Barter got that nickname in the California mines and became a real thorn in the side of the authorities during the gold rush. In 1856, he and his gang stole a mule loaded with about $80,000 in gold, a fortune that would be worth millions today. But here's where it gets interesting. Hunted by posses and sheriffs, Dick hid the loot somewhere remote in the Sierra Nevada. He drew a rough map with arrows, measurements, and marks on rocks. That piece of paper bounced through saloons, farms, and junk auctions for decades. Dick died in a shootout in 1859, taking the secret to the grave. The gold was never recovered and is probably still buried somewhere in those mountains. Number 19. Everyone thinks the Old West died sometime in the 1880s, but the truth is, it took its last breath a lot later than you'd think. In 1919, in a dusty little town in Nevada, 2 guys who'd hated each other for years decided to settle it the old way. Right in the middle of Main Street, with worn revolvers on their hips, they faced off while shopkeepers locked their doors and locals watched through cracks in their windows. Not many words were said before their hands dropped to their holsters. The shots rang out, and both men went down with fatal wounds. But the detail nobody expected came seconds later. The town's first automobile rolled onto that same street, honking loud. It was like one era was dying right there in the dust, while another one arrived on 4 wheels. Number 20. Most people think the Old West died in 1890, when the government officially declared the frontier closed. But that's only half the story. The cattle barons just traded their hats for suits and ties. Fights over territory turned into courtroom battles over mineral rights. And hired guns? Today they work in law offices, billing by the hour. The same instinct that drove men across the continent chasing gold now moves fortunes in digital markets. The difference is, nobody needs a revolver anymore when a well-written contract does the same job. If you followed this series up to here, you can already see the cowboy hiding behind every headline. Tell me what part surprised you. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell.